The last sunrise Emily Noble ever photographed glowed soft and pale, the kind of muted morning light she loved to capture and share. For years, Emily woke up before most of Westerville, quietly stepping outside to find the sky just beginning to blush. It was her ritual, a small, peaceful act from a woman who had spent a lifetime learning to survive storms. The day before, she had turned 52. She celebrated with simple plans: fresh water from a spring, a quiet picnic, a walk through the Field of Heroes, and a night out with the man she married just 2 years earlier, Matthew L. Moore. It should have been uneventful. A birthday. A gentle day. A day that should have folded into the next, like all the others. But by the next morning, Emily Noble was gone. Her car stayed in the driveway. Her wallet, her keys, her phone, untouched. And the man who said he loved her was the last known person to see her alive. Emily wasn't someone who disappeared. Not like this. Not without a word. She was tiny in stature, just 5 feet tall and barely touching 100 pounds. But she filled every room with the kind of energy people remembered. Friends said she carried a spark in her voice and a stubbornness that kept her moving, even when life seemed determined to break her down. And tragedy had followed her closely, always a shadow at her back. Friends lost to AIDS in the 1990s, her father's devastating accident, a car crash that took her mother soon after, the suicide of her first husband, and the loss of her stepchildren. Each time, Emily grieved, then somehow found her way upright again. It was her defining trait. She overcame. She always overcame. When she met Matthew Moore on Plenty of Fish, she saw in him someone who needed stability, a person struggling beneath years of grief and hardship much like she had. They married quickly. She welcomed his teenage son Joey into her life, and together they tried to build something calm, something steady. But pain never fully left either of them. In 2019, Joey died by suicide, also by hanging, in a park close to their home. The shock of that loss fractured the household. Matthew unraveled. Emily worried. Their marriage strained. By May 2020, the pandemic had only added pressure. Emily still worked at the Medicaid office, the steady income that kept them afloat. Matthew had lost his job. There were arguments. Tension. A message in Emily's phone even said she was scared to go home. But despite everything, she continued to fight her way up from despair the way she always had. She had returned to full-time work. She was taking her long walks again. Friends said she seemed lighter, quietly hopeful. And then came her birthday, the last day anyone saw her alive. The morning began with a drive to Buckle to collect water from a natural spring. They went to the Field of Heroes, where rows of white markers commemorate military service members. They sat beneath an open sky, eating picnic food on the grass. Bars had just reopened after months of lockdown. So they headed downtown, stopping at the Cobalt Grill, where bartender Jessica Selfridge served them drinks and watched them take selfies at the bar. At around 7:30 p.m., they left to continue celebrating. A neighbor saw Emily at home, sometime around 8. And then, according to Matthew, the night simply ended. He said they went to bed. He said he slept in the guest room so he wouldn't disturb her. He said when he woke, she was gone. But the silence Emily left behind didn't match anything in her life. Not the woman she was. Not the habits she kept. Her phone stopped all user activity at 6 p.m. on her birthday. She never used it again. Her wallet waited on the counter. Her car waited in the drive. Everything she carried, everything she would have needed to walk out the door, remained in place, untouched. The only thing missing was Emily herself. At 2:47 p.m., Matthew began calling her friends from her phone, asking if anyone had heard from her. Then he reported her missing.
My wife, Emily Noble, has been missing all day. Her birth is here, with her ID, her car is here with her car keys, and her phone is here. I don't know what you always, I've been advised to call you. It's very, very uncharacteristic for her.
Has she been depressed?
No, we had a great day yesterday. It was just a day, and wow. I got up this morning, she wasn't there, which is not that normal. But I mean, she usually comes home or just, goes for a walk. It's just very, very unusual for her. constant contact with me. The phone was there. She always has her phone with us.
Okay. We have an officer headed to talk to you or give you a call to see how we want to proceed with this, okay?
Okay.
Police arrived at the condo and recorded their walkthrough on body cam. Nothing seemed disturbed. Nothing looked like a struggle. But something about Matthew's behavior stuck with Detective Steve Grubbs. He later said he couldn't shake the feeling that something didn't add up. Something about Matthew's story, or the way he told it, felt off. Within hours, hundreds of volunteers filled the area. Westerville North High School became a command center. The FBI joined. Canine teams, dive units, cadaver dogs. The wooded areas behind the condo were combed with methodical precision, but the search had a fatal flaw. The place where Emily would ultimately be found, an area less than half a mile from her home, was never searched. Matthew spent the days after her disappearance posting flyers, telling people he wanted visibility for Emily's case, but refusing to participate in the organized searches. He avoided police. And then, 4 months after she vanished, after the calls, the flyers, the unanswered questions, 3 women wandering the woods made a discovery that would tear the entire investigation open. It was the afternoon of September 16, 2020. They entered a wooded area west of Emily's home, a spot she often visited to forage for edible plants. And there, suspended from a honeysuckle tree, were skeletal remains in a kneeling position. A black USB cord wrapped around the neck. Bones hanging down. Clothes weathered but recognizable. Her engagement ring and wedding band placed neatly near her leg. Beside them, a water bottle containing a peach-colored liquid with traces of alcohol. Emily, or what was left of her, had been placed in a position that looked like suicide, but something about it didn't feel right. Her remains weighed only 18 pounds when transported to the coroner's office. The bones were fragile, stripped by time and weather. But inside those bones was the story that would split the case in two, the story experts would never agree on. When forensic analysts examined the skeleton, they documented 4 fractures in the hyoid bone, injuries to the nasal cavity, and missing toe bones. Some fractures could have occurred as the body decomposed and shifted, but others, they said, looked like trauma. Serious trauma. Trauma inconsistent with suicide by low suspension hanging. Then came Dr. William Smock, the strangulation expert whose testimony would become the heart of the prosecution's case. He said the injuries proved Emily had been manually strangled, that someone had used their hands, that the scene had been staged. But Dr. Smock never saw Emily's body in person. He never visited the crime scene. He reviewed photos and reports, and made a declaration that would change everything. This was homicide. The county issued a death certificate marking Emily's death as homicide by manual strangulation. Matthew Moore was indicted, arrested, and charged with murder.
Do not move!
Yes, sir. Ready for it? Stick both your hands out this way, Matt. Both of them straight.
Seatbelts on, seatbelts on.
That's just listen to what you're being told.
All right. Take that.
His bail was set at $2.5 million, a number that kept him in jail until trial. But something about the case wouldn't stay still. Evidence had been mishandled. Bones were left behind at the scene and found months later. The location of the body, which authorities claimed to have searched, had never actually been searched at all. There was no DNA linking Matthew to any act of violence. No blood. No eyewitness. No confession. Nothing physical that tied him to the crime. And then there was the timeline. Matthew told investigators he spent the morning of May 25th working at a bus depot, but his phone pinged from a quarry less than a mile from the condo, a place visible from their home. A camera captured what looked like his blue Fiat driving near the quarry. Police believed Emily had been killed shortly after returning home from her walk that morning, long before Matthew claimed he realized she was missing. But others saw inconsistencies in the forensic reports, mistakes in the investigation, and the possibility that the fractures in her hyoid bone were not caused by strangulation, but by decomposition or animal activity. At trial, everything collided. Experts contradicted each other. The defense attacked the integrity of the investigation. The prosecution painted a picture of a man unraveling under financial and emotional strain. The jury left the courtroom to walk the woods where Emily had been found, to stand beneath the branch where her remains had hung. And then, in less than 3 hours, they returned with a verdict. Not guilty. Matthew collapsed in tears. He maintained he had been falsely accused, that Emily had died by suicide, and that he had been punished for grief and circumstance. He wrote a book afterward, insisting the entire tragedy had been misunderstood, but Emily's family never accepted that. Her sister never believed she would end her life in that way. Her closest friends, the ones who knew her past, the tragedy she had survived, the battles she had fought, said the same thing. Emily didn't give up. Not like that. Not after everything. Today, one truth remains certain. Emily Noble, a woman who spent her life standing up after every blow, is gone. And the question of what happened in those woods, the truth between grief, evidence, mistakes, and shadows, is still suspended in the air, unresolved. The discovery of Emily Noble's remains should have offered clarity, an anchor in a sea of uncertainty. Instead, it fractured the case into two opposing worlds, one built on suspicion, the other on doubt. Her bones were stripped by time, but they were also buried beneath contradictions. Evidence pointed one way, then the other. Experts clashed. The investigation struggled with silence and mistakes that could not be undone. And at the center of it all stood a woman who had lived through endless tragedy, a husband who said he loved her, and a community trying to piece together truth from debris. When investigators reconstructed the final day of Emily's life, the gaps were startling. Her phone had stopped responding by 6 p.m. on her birthday. She never posted again, never texted, never made a call, but Matthew's phone remained active the entire night until 6 a.m., unusual behavior for someone who claimed he was asleep. Detectives believed he had stayed awake, perhaps pacing, perhaps planning, perhaps plotting how to make a tragedy look like something else. They believed he killed her sometime after returning home from the bars. But there was no blood, no sign of a struggle, no report of a scream, nothing disturbed inside the small condo she considered her safe place. Emily's shoes weren't muddy. Her clothing didn't show tearing, and the USB cord, wrapped around her neck in a single loop, was not the sort of object she normally carried with her. Prosecutors leaned heavily on this detail, saying the item suggested staging. But the defense asked a different question. If Emily had intended to end her life quietly, would she have created a spectacle in the woods? Or would she have slipped away in silence, like she did the morning she vanished? The physical position of her remains, kneeling, folded forward, hands resting near her leg, looked strange, even unsettling. Some experts said such a posture could occur in low suspension hangings after days or months of decomposition. Others said the position suggested placement, not natural collapse. But nothing surrounding her body was conclusive. No footprints, no clear pattern of disturbance, no evidence that someone else had climbed the tree or supported her weight. The scene told two competing stories, each believable if viewed alone, each impossible when placed beside the other. As investigators dug deeper, they found details that fueled suspicion. When police first entered the condo, Matthew had moved items in the garage, including an extension cord. He later said he was tidying. Prosecutors said he was hiding evidence. He had also referred to Emily in the past tense during interviews, speaking of her as if she were already gone. He suggested suicide more than once before her body had been discovered. To detectives, this felt rehearsed. To Matthew, it was despair. A man grieving a wife he feared was lost forever. But perhaps the most troubling piece of the puzzle was the quarry ping. Matthew said he spent the entire morning of May 25th checking advertisements on buses at the depot where he worked. Yet at 9:25 a.m., his phone pinged off a tower near Murphy's Quarry, visible from the condo close enough to walk, and then a car resembling his blue Fiat was seen driving in that direction. Prosecutors argued he had gone to assess the staging location. The defense countered that the cell tower covered a wide area and that ping data could be misleading. But the coincidence lingered like a shadow. 4 months passed. 4 months of searches, interviews, speculation, growing tension, and a family desperate for closure. And then 3 women walked into the woods one afternoon and found Emily's remains by accident. Not because authorities led them there, not because the woods had been thoroughly examined, but because they had gone searching on their own. And this mistake, this absence of method, would haunt everything that followed. Investigators returned to the scene months later and found bones that had been missed, including vertebrae. A mistake like that wasn't small. It raised questions about contamination, about movement, about the reliability of everything noted and photographed on that first day. If bones were missed, What else had been overlooked? What else had been assumed? What else had been lost? The skeletal analysis conducted by OSU revealed injuries, but their timing was the contentious part. Some fractures could have occurred around the time of death, meaning trauma. Others could have been caused by decomposition, shifting soil, insects, or animals. The hyoid bone, the most debated piece, was fractured in multiple places. Dr. Smock insisted that such fractures did not occur in hangings like the one depicted at Emily's scene. But OSU pathologists hesitated. They refused to certify the manner of death as homicide. They questioned whether the fractures could have developed post-mortem. This disagreement created a divide. On one side, an expert convinced this was homicide. On the other, a team saying the evidence was insufficient. And then there was the coroner, who signed the death certificate declaring homicide despite not being a board-certified forensic pathologist. By the time Matthew Moore was indicted, the case had transformed into a legal battlefield defined by uncertainty. Every detail prosecutors presented had an equal and opposite explanation from the defense. The story could be read as murder. It could be read as suicide. And the investigation itself, with its overlooked bones, unsearched areas, and contradictory reports, gave jurors more than enough reason to hesitate. Inside the courtroom, the weight of every tragedy in Matthew and Emily's lives filled the air. Emily's sister sat among the rows, listening to medical terminology that reduced her sister's life to diagrams, fractures, and measurements. Matthew sat in a suit, the same man who had once posted flyers on utility poles, now accused of killing the woman he said he loved. The prosecution built their case slowly, focusing on motive. They painted Matthew as a man worn down by loss, his son's death, his mother's death, unemployment, financial strain, and suggested Emily had been pulling away. They described bruising on her arm, witnessed by a friend. They discussed arguments over drinking and tension in the home. They revealed messages Emily sent saying she was scared. And they hinted that Matthew feared losing access to money, stability, and the relationship itself. But the defense pushed back. They called the investigation sloppy. They said assumptions were made before facts were gathered. They argued that no scientific certainty supported the homicide theory. And they emphasized that despite months of searching, interviewing, and digital analysis, no physical evidence linked Matthew to violence. Not a fingerprint, not a hair, not a speck of DNA. When Dr. Smock testified, he stated with absolute confidence that Emily had been strangled. His voice was firm, unwavering, but cross-examination revealed he had not personally examined the remains, and that his interpretations were based solely on photographs. His reading arrived months after the original pathologists had already expressed doubt. Jurors took note. The trial lasted less than 2 weeks, but its emotional toll stretched far beyond that. Jurors visited the condominium, walked the wooded trail, stood beneath the tree where Emily's remains had hung. Some cried during testimony. Some watched Matthew carefully, studying his face, searching for sincerity or deception. And then, on August 26, 2022, after fewer than 3 hours of deliberation, the verdict came down. Not guilty. The courtroom fell silent before sound slowly returned. Gasps, sobs, the clatter of reporters rushing to the hallway. Matthew collapsed, shoulders shaking. He mouthed, "Thank you," to the jury, over and over, as if the words themselves were a lifeline. For Emily's family, the verdict deepened the wound. They believed the system had failed. They believed the investigation had failed. And they believed Emily had been denied justice. For Matthew, the acquittal did not clear the fog around him. He said he was financially destroyed by the ordeal. He left Westerville. He lived under suspicion from strangers who believed he had gotten away with something. And he maintained, in interviews and in the book he later wrote, that Emily had taken her own life. But the unresolved nature of this case rested not only on expert disagreement or investigative failures, it rested on the complexity of Emily herself. She was a woman who had survived isolation, depression, trauma, grief. She had endured more than most people experience in a lifetime. She fought through every tragedy. She loved nature, sunlight, long walks through wooded areas. She found solace in solitude. She had struggled in the months before her death, and yet her friends insisted she was rising again, preparing to move back into full-time work, reconnecting with her routines, finding her footing one more time. The question that remains, the one that haunts every corner of this case, is simple but impossible. Would Emily have ended her life this way? Or did something else happen in the hours after her birthday celebration? What happened in the woods on County Line Road remains suspended between these two truths: the possibility that she chose her final steps, and the possibility that someone else chose them for her. Today, the answers linger like the soft morning light Emily used to photograph: quiet, distant, out of reach. A life filled with resilience was cut short, a community was left divided, and a mystery, born on her 52nd birthday, continues to echo long after the verdict was read. And if her story teaches anything, it's that behind every courtroom, every headline, every forensic debate, there is a human being whose final moments deserve clarity, even when the truth resists the light. If you found this story important, unsettling, or worthy of deeper attention, subscribe to stay connected to Unsolved True Crime, where we continue to explore the cases that demand answers, compassion, and remembrance. Thank you for watching, and may Emily Noble's story never be forgotten.